Hello, and welcome to our next presentation. On behalf of the MIT CDOIQ Virtual Symposium, we would like to thank all of our sponsors who have continued to support the symposium during this very challenging year. Before we thank our partners, we'd like to ask that sometime during the symposium's breaks that you visit our partners' virtual booths. You can also visit the Content Hub on the MIT CDOIQ website for some great partner resources. We'd like to thank the following partners: Deloitte, Informatica, Privacy Analytics, CDOIQ, Fusion Alliance, KPMG, Sandhill Consultants, Tamer, Elation, Ali Data, Big ID, Boomi, Caserta, Citizen, Data Kitchen, Garage, Wakira, Pylog, Click, ThoughtSpot, Eckerson, Global IDs, Snowflake, Starburst. And as I said, please make every effort to visit our partners, use the virtual passport, because without them and our partner support, the symposium could not be held. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the MIT CDOIQ Symposium Session 13B. We've actually saved the best for last. So good afternoon, and in this panel, we will cover the Global CDO's challenge from three main perspectives. Let me actually show my screen, which will be very useful for us doing the introductions. And I'll just unplug my external monitor there. So in today's panel session, we will cover the global CDO challenges from three main aspects: privacy regulations, technologies, and data literacy, data awareness if you prefer. Of course, in today's day and environment, we will also cover the pandemic and its implications from a global perspective on the Chief Data Officer's role and responsibilities. However, let me first introduce our three panelists. Della Shea, Vice President, Senior Vice President Data Governance and Chief Privacy Officer. Della is also a CDO Country Ambassador and a Woman of Influence. Welcome, Della.
Okay, sorry about that.
Here we go.
Yeah, here I am. Can you see me?
Yes, I believe the people at are people seeing Della?
Perfect, because I can't see myself, which will make it easier for me to talk. I'm just going to talk to the audience. So thank you very much, Robert, for that introduction. And thank you to my fellow panelists. It's really a pleasure to be working with you on this important topic and to bring the perspective from a privacy regulatory standpoint to an ever-growing challenge of managing data, particularly from a global perspective. So it's really hard these days to talk about data without also talking about privacy and the implications of how data is being used on important topics such as digital ethics. So over the past several years that I've been involved.
Hey, Della.
Yes?
Sorry, I'll just finish the introductions of Pat and Ido.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's why I'm so sorry, Robert, because I thought you said over.
That's not a problem. That's not a problem.
Sorry.
You want to get to your topic, and we will get to that very, very soon. But what I will do is I'll just welcome Patrick Minton, U.S. and Global Chief Data Officer, PwC. Pat will be talking today on technologies. Welcome, Pat.
Hi, Robert. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. And our third panelist, which we're delighted to have, and we've interviewed before, is Ido Bigger, the Chief Data Officer of ATL Israel National Airlines, also university lecturer, and also a country CDO ambassador. So welcome all three panelists. So thank you for giving us your time today. For our audience, we have divided the following questions into segments for each panelist, and each panelist will have approximately 10 minutes to cover their section. And then we'll go into a 10-minute coverage from all the panelists on the COVID-19 from a global perspective. So now, Della, we'll start with you first. As
Perfect.
a Canadian data leader and from a global perspective, could you provide your insights into the impact of where global regulations and operations are and what innovations may be needed in the future?
Sure. So consider this take two. So I apologize. I'm still getting used to presenting at conferences virtually. I think this is actually the first one. So I apologize to everyone. So I'm going to start from kind of the high level thinking about data. So I've been participating in this conference for my third year. And for the past several years, we've been talking about data and data from an opportunity perspective. And I think now we're starting to really look at data, not just from the opportunity perspective, but what it actually means to individuals and also from a risk perspective. And ultimately from what are country regulators doing about that to ensure that we strike the right balance between innovating and driving the economy and driving progress while also protecting the individual privacy rights. So technology obviously provides huge opportunities. Data provides enormous opportunities from an analytics perspective, using data as an asset, looking for ways to be able to monetize data itself, as well as to drive additional value using data within the organizations. However, as we probably already know, laws almost always lag behind innovation and progress. So what we're starting to see now, probably really starting from 2018 standpoint when GDPR first came into force, it was really a turning point in terms of looking at data privacy laws, what's happening around the landscape with respect to the use of data, because a lot of people are really starting to worry about data, how their personal information is being used. Organizations are also starting to come under fire in terms of business models, and are these business models appropriate as we move into the digital economy, into the digital age? Well, regulators are really trying to figure out how do you balance both, because you really need to drive the prosperity of your country while also protecting your citizens and ensuring that in that process that their information is not mishandled. So I think everyone is really increasingly being concerned about where are we going to land. There's a lot of things happening in our environment that are causing regulators to think about how do we need to design the appropriate framework to strike that balance. Certainly from a Canadian perspective, being able to support and drive innovation is really at the heart of Canada's federal privacy laws. But certainly there's a lot of increasing pressure around the adequacy of that law as we move into the digital age, when there's concepts like consent and actually asking individuals how they want to have their information handled and used. Very difficult to operationalize those concepts in the digital economy, in the types of environments where data is really ubiquitous. From an overall global perspective, an interesting tidbit, the UN actually tracks the types of data privacy laws that are in place across the globe. So last time I checked, approximately 66% of countries actually had privacy and data laws in place. There were about 19% have data privacy laws that are in draft, while the remaining countries, either they don't have any laws or the information is unknown. So if anyone's interested, you can actually visit the UN website and look for the UN data law tracker and find information about that. It's kind of interesting to follow. So I think that's really indicative of the importance of ensuring that there's appropriate guardrails around how we foster and frame the digital economy, that it definitely needs to be looking at the role of the individual in that equation and the role of society. So I think what we're starting to see more and more is a trend towards more prescriptive regulations, which I am concerned about for a number of reasons, mainly in terms of having longevity of rules and regulations away from what traditionally has been more principle-based legislation. So we certainly have seen that in perhaps some of the most well-known changes within the legal and regulatory landscape which included the GDPR legislation in Europe and CCPA, which is the California Consumer Privacy Act, where both laws have designed very prescriptive requirements with respect to data handling, and they're definitely favoring individuals having a lot more control over their information. And we're starting to see this trend in other regulations, such as open banking initiatives. So from a data perspective, a data officer perspective, or even a technology executive perspective, ensuring that you meet all those requirements poses a number of challenges. The first being, how do you actually get a handle on all of the different requirements? So as I mentioned, 66% of countries have data protection laws. And if you are operating in several of those, trying to understand the differences is a big challenge, particularly because the laws aren't designed to be global. They're definitely designed to be specific to a region or a district. So trying to ensure that you are complying with all of those laws, very difficult. So looking for frameworks such as looking at accountability, which is definitely a framework that privacy regulators have looked to in terms of what kind of controls and systems can organizations put in place to ensure that their data practices meet expectations, not just from a regulatory perspective, but from an individual perspective. Because at the end of the day, if you strip away the laws and regulations, it really comes down to trust. Are you doing the right thing with the data? Just because you have all of this data, it's really important that you ask yourself, what should I do with this data? So this is where frameworks such as digital ethics, as an example, become an important platform to think about from a data treatment. It's not just about processing the data to drive the opportunities. It's about how do you do respectful data processing that is actually in alignment with the intent of those laws and regulations. The second important thing about that is the translation. As a chief data officer, one of the greatest challenges that I've experienced in trying to ensure that our data practices not only align with laws and regulations, but also foster innovation and also foster trust and confidence of our clients, is trying to take very legalistic terms and turn them into actionable actions that somebody in technology or somebody who's developing products or somebody that is delivering services can actually understand. So I would say from an overall global perspective, the key themes are about understanding all of the requirements, kind of throwing them into a melting pot and figuring out where you land to drive the best path forward. And this really requires an interdisciplinary approach. It is about a team. It's not something that any one group can do on their own. So it's about developing the capabilities and the disciplines to be able to think beyond just what can I do, but what should I do and what am I able to do? So I would say from a regulatory perspective, definitely seeing a lot of themes around increasing legislation. I don't think we're going to go back where we're going to see less. We're going to see more and more prescriptive requirements. So it's really up to us as data leaders to figure out how do you unpack all of that intent and practically apply it to your organization and support your business objectives and support your technology partners to actually achieve what you're there to do, which is to deliver products and services or to provide any other type of service to your end customers.
I think, Della, you've been heard to say, just because you can do it, you may not, you should not do it.
Yeah.
That's an option too. In the last 2 minutes, when I look at your key points there, you mentioned trust. That's a theme that has come out since the first keynote about trusting the data. Mm-hmm. But when you look around all the different countries, and Della, you're based in Canada, and obviously the US has got a patchwork of privacy regulations, and Europe has got GDPR. When you look around, what do you think are who's doing the best prescriptive processes? Not who's actually doing it the best, but what do you think is a good guideline that you would say, you know what, I've seen this. These are should follow.
I would say that Canada certainly has been looked to as having very solid legislation for many years. We certainly have led the way in terms of having principle-based legislation, which I think pretty much have stood the test of time. However, there are stresses to that legislation on requirements such as consent, like getting individuals' consent or asking their permission to process data. So at the time when those laws were enacted, data processing was pretty simple. You complete a form, you got the service. Now it's about you provide information and it's unlimited capability for that information to go to multiple stakeholders, having lineage around all of the uses of that data. Extremely difficult in 2020 and beyond, when the technology capability far outweighs what those laws were intending to do. So I would say from traditional perspective, Canada has been very strong. However, I would say that I've always appreciated the legislative structures within the United States in terms of when you are actually on the ground trying to implement things, having the interpretation of principles into what it actually means has been extremely helpful. So I think it's about the combination of the two.
Excellent. Thank you, Della. Let me just go back to the my screen here, and I'll just bring up our next topic point, and then I will go back to an open discussion. So hopefully you can see the screen here. So Pat, as we move from privacy, right, into technology, we understand that as a global CDO for PwC, you're currently implementing technologies from a huge global platform point of view, global data platform point of view. From your perspective, what advice and insights could you provide into how an organization could implement technologies globally, and if possible, discuss any challenges such as global versus local issues, digitalizing the workforce, and other advice that you could offer?
Sure. And I guess maybe the best way to do that is to share a little bit about what we've done, right? And I can talk through some of the challenges and the things that we've seen there. So as context and backdrop, as you mentioned, Robert, we have member firms within over 160 countries around the world. And so when we're talking about deploying a global platform, and to Della's point, each one of these countries and territories that we operate in have their own separate set of laws, rules, regulations, sovereignty issues that you have to deal with. And it could be intellectual property issues. It could be issues related to the sharing of intellectual property. It could be related to the technology vendors that you're using and the cooperation or adoption of that technology partner's ability to operate within a certain country or not. So there's a myriad of challenges that really come out there. But a few things that we've been doing. So we've been on a journey to change the way that we work. And as we looked across the firm, like I mentioned, over 160 countries, over 350,000 people around the world. And at the end of the day, we're a data company. Everything that we do, all the services that we provide to our clients, is centered around being able to help them by understanding their data, using their data to provide insights, whether it's insights around an audit that we're performing for financial purposes, whether it's insights to generate tax information so that they can better take advantage of tax situations that they're in, or in a more traditional consulting services type of advice and insights. At the end of the day, we're a data company. And as we thought about this, our leadership team placed a super strategic importance around the fact that we're going to be world-class at managing data, because it's at the heart and lifeblood of every single thing that we do. It's part of the reason that we actually stood up our global chief data office. And that shows the commitment that we have from the very senior most leadership in the firm all the way through around our data is really at the heart of everything that we do within our digital strategy as a firm. So a big central piece to that, as you mentioned, Robert, was the deployment of our data platform. So in short, if you think about it, we have, like I said, hundreds of thousands of people within the firm that are getting data from their clients and need to have secure, robust, scalable infrastructure in place so that we can get that data, establish that trust with our client that we're going to properly care for and be custodians of that data in an efficient, scalable, and secure manner. But also our platform needs to have all of the digital tools and capabilities so that our staff can get to that data to do deep analytics and AI and machine learning and, all the way down to just data visualization capabilities. And so there's, our data platform is built to provide all of these capabilities for our staff as they're interacting with clients to get their data, ingest it to the platform securely, store it securely, being able to catalog it so that we understand what we have and how to be able to find it. And as we did this, it opened up new opportunities for us. And I was fortunate enough to attend Doug Laney's discussion on the previous session whenever he was talking about the democratization of data. And one of the interesting things that we found was that as we are using this platform and deploying it globally more and more, there's a massive increase in our ability now to really democratize our data and share it more broadly across the world. If you think back in the days of when accounting was done on an abacus and, tablets and everything else, pretty hard to share that information with one another. But this interconnected platform really establishes that infrastructure to allow us to democratize our data. But now we have that other hurdle of, well, we got to make everybody comfortable with being able to share and understand that our data is an enterprise asset and treat it as such. And so there's a big cultural change that we're going through as a firm as a part of this. I would tell you that the technologies themselves are not really the challenge. In today's world, the biggest challenge is staying up to date with the latest technologies that are out there and trying not to over-index on the leading edge, I think, because it's really easy to get caught in this perpetual cycle of evaluating new tools and capabilities and technologies to add to our platform versus building scale in the capabilities of a certain set of tools and technologies that we're going to try and, really train all of our staff and make sure that they're really competent and proficient in a certain handful of technologies. So that was a bit of a challenge for us coming out of the gate, was really landing on that core set of technologies that we were going to make our central starting point, with a full understanding that we're technology agnostic, we're vendor agnostic. And so over time that will change, but it's really metering how fast we start to change out tools, whether it's our AI and machine learning technologies that we're using, or data visualization capabilities, all the way down to the cloud technology providers that we're partnering with, et cetera. We try really hard to stay agnostic, but also strike that fine line between staying current, relevant, and leveraging the best of the best that's out there, but also having enough time where we can build competency core skills and capabilities in some of those technologies. So the technologies are there, but I think the biggest challenge in today's world that we've seen, and it goes again somewhat back to what Della was mentioning, is you think about how you then deploy a global platform like that is able to be truly used and leveraged in all the ways that we want to by 160 plus countries around the world. There are just certain realities out there that you have to come to grips with. There are different sovereignty issues within different territories, which will allow them sometimes to not have their data leave within the walls of their country. Well, what does that mean if you're trying to deploy a global platform? Well, it means that you now have to come up with a deployment strategy where you can account for those things. And do you need, satellite storage capabilities or smaller versions of your platform that you can then deploy into territories to solve for their sovereignty issues that they have to deal with, but that also stay interconnected through the larger platform as is allowable, permissible by law, and ethical to do, right? So, that has been a real challenge for us. And, the way that we think about it is we have multiple instances of our platform now deployed strategically around the world to serve, the major geographic areas and the markets that we serve, but also satellite or bespoke instances of the platform deployed in certain countries just to be conscious and handle the challenges that exist within certain territories. So that deployment strategy and being really upfront around understanding where and how you're going to be able to deploy this vis-a-vis the regulations that are in place is kind of a bit of a challenge because quite honestly, a lot of times those regulations within the territories, it's hard to rationalize that from 160 countries into a coherent point of view to develop that deployment strategy. So those are some of the challenges that we've seen along the way there, Robert.
One of the things that was mentioned, and in fact, it's so great to have our global CDOs, like the three of you, listen in to other sessions to hear what other people are doing within the community. That's so great to hear. One of our other data leaders had mentioned that technology as a platform is great, but they sometimes, and they don't sort of stick to one, but they're forced to continue to update because of the competition. Are you forced, when you look at your technology stack, is there anything that forces you to look to change it? Or are you happy with what you've got? In the last minute, if you can kind of talk to that, that'd be great.
Yeah, well, I would tell you, Robert, that I believe we're really far ahead of the curve to begin with. So we don't really see the case for change or the impetus to make changes and to evolve our platform strategy being driven directly out of our competitors. I think we're actually, as in front of that as anybody. I think it's really more driven around the business and our clients. And so our clients, you think about where we've been the last 6 months and the changing environment and the way that we work with our clients now. The world has completely changed in a very short, rapid time frame. And that requires different capabilities than we had previously. The good news is we had been on this journey for quite a while before that, whether it was upgrades to our infrastructure to allow, our massive workforce to be able to connect and work remotely, whether it was upskilling our people, whether it was deploying these platforms, establishing our CDO functions so that we can, apply the proper amount of policy and governance on top of all of this. We were already well down that path. So really, we're at that point now where the majority of our changes are driven out of our business. And our business continues to evolve as everybody else's. And so really, that's where we see the majority of that demand come from.
Thank you, Pat. And it's good to hear that PwC is in a leading position. So with that, let us turn to the third major question here on a topic that both reflects privacy, regulations, and technology, that of data literacy. From a global perspective, and Ido, I'm going to have you address this question. From a global perspective, all of us have heard about data literacy, data awareness. Perhaps you can address if there's any secret sauce to implementing data literacy in a standard way. And in addition, what are your opinions if there are any differences between local versus global needs and using the right language? Ido, over to you.
Well, thanks, Robert. If we think about data literacy, let's first of all discuss what it is, and then confront the differences between the local data literacy programs and the global ones. So when you talk about data literacy, you have two aspects. One is, of course, the technical data literacy, when you go alongside your business units and teach them how to utilize the tools, the BI tools, the analytics tools, in order to be better at what they do.
But on the cultural aspect, you have to have some sort of internal ambassadors within the organizations to kind of reflect and be your representative with the data utilization of the organization, because they're, at the end of the day, they are the domain experts. So when we confront those challenges on a local area, when we are dealing with, for example, only in our headquarters in Tel Aviv, first of all, we're using the same language, right, in Hebrew. So we teach our people about the tools we're using, for example, Tableau, whether it's Excel, whether it's BI4 or Python or SQL. We teach within our domain. You can physically go and teach, the tools and make those internal champion and local champions learn about the tools and teach and be like trainers, right? They're the one who's teaching the internal units and the business units themselves. So by that, we create this internal culture of intensive learning, and which never ends. They teach themselves to be better all the time, and by that improve the self-service abilities. Now, when you see the same thing on a global perspective, and at El Al we have 40 different destinations. So we have something like 15 or 20 different stations where people are there, permanently, and we need to teach them about the tools themselves. So by that, when you talk about a global data literacy program, you have to confront the language issue, but not only that, there is the culture issue, right? When you teach someone in Eastern Europe about utilizing the tools and the way, for example, the station managers are going to use the analytical tools that we provided, maybe it's going to be in a different way than the Western European ones and the ones in the States and the one in Far East or India. So for example, we need to, first of all, make sure that all the tools themselves are, for our case, it's going to be in English, but the lecture or the training is going to be maybe in the local language, because sometimes the local ones are not very English fluent. So you need to find not only a technical champion within the domain, but you need to find someone who's going to be the domain experts, like the local domain experts or the local ambassador for this universal program. So by that, that would be the main challenges. Because, for example, if I found myself working with the station managers, again, in Eastern Europe, right? So they have to confront even different issues than the one in Western Europe, because in Western Europe, we have a lot more connecting flights, for example. So the different approach would be to focus them on their main pains or main goals as a station to work with. Now, when we try to work with, for example, the United States main office, they're mainly dealing with sales and with customer service. So you need to teach them about the relevant tools with regards to those aspects. So once we established the data literacy program, we started in our own headquarters in Tel Aviv. And we kind of mapped all the current users of data, which were approximately 1,000 people, because it can be a very basic user that only sees their reports as a simple viewer, or it can be either, we call them those people red, right? Red level, it's the basic level. But then we had the intermediate level, which is the yellow ones. And over there, they are really playing with the data as, let's say, advanced users, and sometimes they create their own reports, etc. And the final level would be the green ones, which are the ones who are really creating the universes or working with the data or connecting themselves to new data sources. And we started this program with going to the business unit managers and ask them, how many people do you need in each level, right? Because sometimes you don't need all your people to be experts in a certain thing. For example, if we went to the frequent flyer programs manager, we asked him how many people you want them to be expert in Python. So he said only one. All right, you don't need everybody to be excellent in Python. So he told us, I want one green in Python, two, for example, yellow in Tableau, and four yellow in business object. So we kind of created this program that will help them within a certain period of time to get to this level. Now think of it in a global way, because the same thing is going to happen again in those different locations around the world. So we had to utilize the virtual mode in a more frequent way when we taught those people what to do. The main challenge in a global perspective would be to make the champion a true champion and a local ambassador in the global perspective. And by that, I mean, maybe sometimes you need to physically go and teach him like to be the trainer in his own location, or to bring him, it would be even easier to bring those people back to the headquarters for a specific training, deep training, for them to go and then go back to their own local location and be representing the program in a much better way. Now think of it as different levels of utilization. The first utilization is going to be the analytical approach. And by that, they are kind of utilizing the tools and getting better decisions by doing so. So this is kind of the basic level that we all know. And by that, you teach them how to really understand the data product, as we call it, that they got. And so we have, for example, in each of every one of our products, like an info button where they can see a whole description of the tool, of the product. And by the way, the champions are the one who wrote this explanation, because it's very important for us that the domain expert would write this description for him to be responsible for whatever is there. So if there's any change in this product, he is the owner of this change. And by that, we always making sure that he's in control of his product. And if someone wants to change a business term or a different way of calculating a term, then he's the one responsible for this term. He's the business owner for those facts that are in his data product. Now, the second level would be indications. So for example, if we have a certain data on a customer or on someone that will need a certain action that will be happening because of this indication, then it's something that's going to be useful. For example, if we found a way to predict that someone is going to churn from his credit card, right, flight card for our programs, then, for example, we don't need to do a specific action with that besides putting an indication for the customer in his CRM. Okay, so the next time this customer talks to us, he knows, there's a big chance that he's going to leave his flight card. But the third level, which is the most important one, and what actually makes the data-driven approach, is the one who are actually operating. The insights become something operational. And by that, we needed to teach the people to ask for it. For example, if we have unattended passengers like kids, or if we have people that are have wheelchairs, needs assistance. So in certain stations, we needed to understand like the thresholds of how many wheelchairs can this local station manager handle. So you can imagine that, for example, in Bucharest, in Romania, the station manager can handle up to 3, maybe 4 wheelchairs. Whether in Lux, for example, Los Angeles, he can handle up to 20 wheelchairs. So not only building the threshold, but making them understand that they can even think in those thresholds. So for example, we can operate an automatic indication and automatic process of the local, we call it PRM, the local staff within the airport. We need you to prepare 3 more wheelchairs because we know our internal station manager can handle only 4. Okay, so we kind of implemented a way that those indications became operational, and by that helped us a lot, confront the reality. So the data literacy program, again, as you mentioned, it's not only technical, it's cultural, right? We made them think, dream, and of course, later on demand. And they understood that when they talk to us, they need to figure out whether it's level 1 of we need information in order to get better decisions, or we need information to get indications for something that is happening, or we need this information to become operational act, like an operational process that will be thrive through that. So by that, I think we kind of taught the organization to speak the same language, even though it was, again, international in 40 different locations. But we kind of maintain the way that we get those demands and we work alongside with them. So those were the main challenges that we confronted and, of course, dealt with. The ownership of the data products, their ability to request information or request the way info will be utilized, and of course the technical aspect, which is very important for us.
So 30 seconds, Ido, just before we go on to our fourth topic. Machine learning and artificial intelligence involvement in data literacy, data in office. How do you see that impacting from a global perspective?
Well, as mentioned before, not all units needs, a local data scientist to work within their own domain. So for example, we have one unit that we kind of created their ability to have their own data science team, which is, again, as mentioned before, the Frequent Flyer program. I truly believe that the domain experts always will understand and be better at their domain than the data guys from the technical aspect. By that, I mean that they know, the best way of what's going on in their location or their domain, and you need to teach them, whether it's Python or whether it's models, the right models to kind of lead them and train them to do their job better in this aspect.
Excellent. Thank you, Ido. Just quickly before we go into our Q&A portion, and there are some questions out there, I just want to really bring up this last point. And again, we talked to the panelists, and we really felt that these three questions were main issues. However, we couldn't escape the fact that the global-19 pandemic and its implications from a global perspective on the Chief Data Officer's role. So what we want to do is take a few minutes and in reverse order, just maybe have our panelists talk about the impact it's had on our CDOs. So Ido, if you want to just start, just take a quick minute, the impact of COVID-19 on the global role and specifically on your role.
Well, I don't think I need to elaborate too much about the impact of the pandemic on an airline, right?
Yeah.
Yes, we're kind of the front line of this war. So we suffer a lot. I can only say that I wrote an article on that, and my main focus is during this crazy time, and 90% of my people are on unpaid leave, as I told you before. So it's a crazy situation. Actually, 90% of the employees of our company is currently in unpaid leave. So it's a huge struggle. But we focused our efforts on four main things. First of all was the cargo flights, the cash flow, of course. So we needed to get really in depth with the financial aspect of it. Of course, the credit card still works, so we need to help, still maintain the business with the little people that we still have. And of course, working on the refund process for our customers. So by that, of course, we are the front line of this pandemic, unfortunately, and probably we're going to be the last one to come out of it. Yeah, so once again, it's everywhere around.
You have our thoughts and sympathies with you for all airlines. So we're all rooting for you, Ido. So let me go. Della, you were the first. I thought, but Della, let's go with you.
Okay. So I think we're 5 months in, a little more than 5 months in since the COVID really took a major toll from a North American perspective. Certainly Europe and Asia felt the impacts a lot sooner than we did here. So a couple of things. I think everyone's goal right now is to get to zero in order for us to get back to, a new normal, and hopefully where we can move more freely around and communicate with each other. So 5 months in, I have the benefit of looking backwards a little bit in the rearview mirror and reflecting on what COVID has meant, both from a personal perspective in my role in terms of trying to collect information and get it disseminated to the right decision makers to be able to respond and react really quickly. I believe that COVID was really the ultimate crisis management and business continuity test for our organization in particular. Symcor, for those of you who may not be familiar with our organization, we are part of Canada's critical infrastructure for financial services. So we do provide payment fulfillment services as well as customer communications. And we played a really critical role actually when the Canadian government started to respond in terms of providing support to individuals that were impacted by COVID through financial payments. So Symcor became part of trying to manage that process very, very quickly. So we, projects that would normally have taken months to implement literally were implemented in days. in weeks, just because the response required it. So it's had its toll. Fortunately for Symcor and our organization, we've come through very, very well, which is a real testament to the teams that are responsible for our BCP and resiliency. I think that's been a major theme for us. Also employees, ensuring that our employees were maintained their health and safety was paramount, that they remained engaged and employed and safe through this whole process. Now we're kind of moving into, okay, now this is where we're at. What are we doing? And in the role of being responsible for data, ensuring that we're looking at risks differently, because the risks prior to COVID, we certainly had cybersecurity threats, cybersecurity issues, but that landscape has dramatically changed in terms of the types of cybersecurity threats that are popping up, in terms of, you know, a lot of influences are happening in terms of incentives for, I guess you would call them bad actors. That certainly is important to look at your overall risk landscape and to see how those things may be changing. Also being able to respond quickly. So from a data strategy perspective, always being influenced by what is happening external to your environment and our environment, what's happening in the world. Certainly when we were in that initial response mode, countries were literally shutting down in days and decisions were being made. So internally we had to accept, or we had to shift work that was happening in one country back to another country, literally within 24 to 48 hours. So everyone was able to resume work come Monday morning. So that didn't happen by accident. It happened by having strong programs in place, but also having information available to be able to make those decisions. And now as we move forward into the future, being able to measure our response based on, again, those macro information assets that are available to us, what's happening in the environment. So for Canada, I think Canada's done a pretty good job of getting us into a stage where we can resume activities, like kids are going back to school, stores and shops and restaurants are open, but being able to pivot very quickly because things can change. So until there's a vaccine and this virus is eradicated, it's going to be how we have to roll in terms of making those decisions and being able to pivot up and down quickly.
A lot of changes. We still have about 5-6 minutes. We've got some questions lined up, but I did want to ask you from what you've seen in your role, especially you've got 300,000 team members that are stationed around the globe. What's been the impact in the workforce, both before, during, and after?
Yeah, well, we've been impacted just like everybody. But I would tell you it's very different around the world with the different countries that we operate in. And for a lot of different reasons. One of the things, and you mentioned this at the very beginning, I have two jobs. I'm both our global chief data officer, but I'm also the chief data officer for the US, which is our largest country that we operate in. And in my global role, the biggest impact that I've seen this year is we're continuing to invest in our data capabilities. Again, like this is absolutely at the very center of our strategic agenda as a firm. It's digital transformation fueled by data. It's a continued investment that we're making. But part of that investment on the global side was, we've been working with all of our member countries and territories that we operate in to help them stand up their own local chief data offices. And we made a lot of progress last year. We have a number of them that are likely listening to this right now, I hope. And we've come a long ways in a short amount of time, but the pandemic activity, when it came out, I was actually down in our Australian firm working with their leadership team to help them frame up and create that business case and the case for standing up their chief data office within that country. But as the pandemic, continued to roll out around the world, certain territories have slowed down how much they can focus on things within their local territories right now. And obviously, it's changed our ability to bring everybody together, to really share and continue to collaborate on our strategies together. And so we're having to deal with everything from time zone differences and coordinating around the world to, just the human element of part of my global team, sits in different countries and, staying connected with people without being able to see them. In the US, though, we've really, as I mentioned before, we've really been ahead of the curve and in positioning ourselves well, not with a pandemic in mind, obviously, but because we just realized that the industry is changing and our clients are demanding that we change the way that we work with them. And those changes of whether it was the platform or digitally upskilling all of our people really put us in a position where we could continue to serve our clients. And now, the way that we're looking at the market is one of the big differences within PwC is we want to work with our clients in the way that works the best for them. And so we've really been very upfront with having those conversations with all of our customers, our clients, to understand if they need us to be physically at their location to do something, well, we can do that. But we've had to mobilize security teams and everything to be able to make sure that we vet that and make sure everybody stays safe. But we've also made the investments so that we can also respect their wishes and interact with them and continue to serve them remotely where it makes more sense for our clients in that case. And it's all about just really driving out that safety and security that, look, we're all human. We all have families and loved ones that we want to go home to at the end of the night. And it's about promoting that safety both for, our people, which are the most important, but also for our clients.
Pat, I couldn't agree with you more. It is all about our people. Ido, let me just ask you, just in the last minute, I know there's a question, we've got a question lined up for Della, but from your point of view, looking to the future, what are you hoping that as your role in the Chief Data Officer that you can kind of bring to the future of ATL National Airlines?
Well, in El Al, the main challenge would be, of course, to get back to business. It's going to take a while. It's not like taking your car back after 2 months of being in the parking lot. So I would say my main efforts would be to focus on whatever is going to make the company operational again. So whether it's information for the processes that needs to be updated, the qualification of the pilots, all the maintenance that is needed for the airplanes, and of course getting back to business with the customers. All right, with all of our offerings. So by that, we're going to be part of the recovery of the airline will be based, of course, on data, and we will do our best to be there. And again, in a much smaller team, with a much smaller team, because for sure this company will be 2/3 of its people. So by that, it's going to be very challenging.
It may be smaller, but it'll probably be a better prepared organization because of what you've gone through. Della, there is a question that came in through the channel, and it said, do you advocate for a chief privacy officer or keep it under data?
So just to repeat the question, do I advocate for chief privacy officer? Do you advocate for a
chief privacy officer or keep it under data? So I guess it's, where should it fall?
Yeah, okay, great question. So I'm going to give an answer that hopefully will suffice, but may not, because it really depends on the organization. So in an ideal state, we could have all sorts of roles, we could have lots of resources, but it really comes down to what is the most effective way to administer privacy considerations, and it's always going to be balanced against what is your scope and what is your resources that can enable that. So in an ideal state, there would be a chief privacy role that would be separate from the chief data officer role, but perhaps maybe having a dotted line. And the reason why I say that is it's really important to have a separation of objectives. So the person that is interpreting the rules or interpreting the requirements ideally would have another area that would be responsible for that execution and implementation, and then they would work very, very closely together. So I do think that there's potentially a segregation of duties issue. Currently in my role, I do have both privacy officer governance requirements, and I also have a team that is responsible for execution. And in the future, we will look to see is this the right model, but at a minimum, I do also advocate for the Chief Data Office to have individuals who have privacy experience and privacy expertise. So there is an emerging field called privacy engineering, and I think they would be ideally situated in the Chief Data Office because they're able to actually take those requirements. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the challenges with the role of a Chief Data Officer is doing that interpretation of requirements and turning them into actual actionable controls and results. So I hope that suffices. But
yep. Pat, I'm going to give you the last word. What would you like to impart to your fellow CDOs, global CDOs, who may be watching this presentation?
Wow, good question. That's a tough one. Don't waste a good crisis. I think, you hear that a lot. And so while these are really tough times, I think that there's an opportunity here, and there's an opportunity to fail and fail fast and fail without the potential recourse that you may have had when times are really good. So this is maybe an opportunity where you can rethink how you and your team are approaching certain topics, whether it's instantiating quality and governance and policies, et cetera, whether it's building new data related capabilities. But there's a bit of a forgiveness period that we're in right now. And it's possibly a good time to take some aggressive steps forward and really take a pole position within your organization to help lead the way out of this and through that recovery that Ido mentioned. Because there are a lot of industries out there that have been really, really impacted by this. It also creates a really interesting job market as the recovery begins to resurface. So again, I've really been pushing for and trying to challenge myself and the team to, make the most of this opportunity, be bold, be aggressive, and now's the time to really step up and lead the way. And you can really start to change that culture and make sure that data is right at the forefront. And I really think it's going to be a big part of the recovery of all of this.
Thank you, Pat. Ido, although your background shows a lovely blue sunny sky, it must be what, 12:30 a.m.?
12:33.
33 a.m. So first of all, we have had an amazing response globally from our organization. Hey, Peter, you just want to go mute on your camera a minute? So we've had an amazing response from our CDO leaders worldwide, and I'd like to thank you for staying up so late to be part of this panel. Pat,
it's my pleasure.
As a global CDO, who has got a lot of activities in the go, thank you for making time for us. The CDO, the MIT CDO Symposium, thanks you for that. And Della, for your first virtual symposium, you aced it, as did Pat and Ido. So on behalf of the symposium, guys, thank you very much indeed. And we'll let you have Tom count us out. But thank you, and we hope to see you live next year in person. Take care.
We'll be there, Robert. Thanks.
Okay.
Bye, Robert. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. Bye, everybody.
You're welcome.